Hello and welcome to Week 3, Art Appreciation, FINA H101 from IPFW. This week we're going to start discussing the artist. Hopefully by now, Week 3, you've settled into a comfortable rhythm for managing the weekly responsibilities of the course. If you have any questions about the course or any technical problems, remember to get in touch with me or with our teaching assistant for this course, or post a question in the online office section of Blackboard right away so that we can help you before you end up missing an assignment or anything like that. A quick reminder that your first unit writing assignment is coming up for week 6. That's a few weeks away, of course, but please don't put that off to the last minute. It does require a little bit of planning on your part. Now let's move on to this week's lesson. Our topic for this week is the artist. We'll be considering how the identity of an artist can influence the work that he or she creates. We'll be focusing on the difference between personal style and period style. So with that, let's look at our first image. So the first image we're looking at is called Fête damour, which means Festival of Love, and was painted in 1717 by French artist Jean-Antoine Watteau. What I'd like you to do this week in your notes is take a moment, pause the video, if that helps, and I'm going to be asking you to describe the style and techniques that you see in these pieces. So I'd like you to try out your skills of description by trying to describe the style of this painting. Not the colors or the figures, but what you would consider to be the overall style of the work. In other words, what can you tell about the way this work has been painted? Has the artist used big heavy brushstrokes or small light ones? What is the overall mood of the painting? What kind of atmosphere do you think is being communicated here? All these questions are just a few of the issues to consider when you describe style in art. So again, take a few seconds to jot down your thoughts on how you would describe the style of this piece. So in this slide, we have two paintings by two different artists, and I have left the names of the artists off the slide on purpose. One of these paintings is by Watteau, the artist you just looked at in the previous slide. The other is by an artist named Jean-Henri Fragonard, who lived and worked at approximately the same time. Now I want you to take a good look at these two paintings. Based only on the details of style you observe in the two paintings, which one do you think is by Watteau, and why do you think so? So again, take a moment to really look at the images and write down in your notes which one you think is by Watteau, and what about the style lends that conclusion to you. Here's a couple of it's useful here to define a couple terms relating to artistic style. Personal style is a peculiar style associated with an individual artist. Period style is an artistic style associated with a historical era. It's typically shared by most artists of a certain period. So although artists working in the same time may follow the same trends in art, there will always be an identifiable personal style that sets them apart as individuals. So in the comparison we have on the screen, while we can explain the differences in the painting's appearances in terms of personal style, their similarities can be attributed to both artists following along with the period style of late 18th century France. In art historical terms, the period was known as Rococo. Rococo is a late Baroque style of the 18th century that is characterized by abundant ornamentation, a light playfulness in both the subject matter and the handling of the paint, and a lack of symmetry. So now that you've spent some time looking at these two paintings, I want you to note what specific details in the style do they share that you think might be the Rococo period style, and how do they differ by what we would call personal style. So again, try to identify the Watteau. Look back at the previous image if you need to. And then try to determine what these elements of period style are shared by both pieces. And I'm not going to tell you which one is the Watteau until we move on to the next image. In that last slide, the image on the left was the one by Watteau. Now you may have noticed during the past few lectures that a lot of European art we've looked at from before the modern era deals with Christian subject matter. This is not because this course aims to focus on Christian art, but simply because over the course of centuries, religious art has been more frequently preserved as sacred objects, while decorative art, family art, had a lower chance of surviving for 1,000 years or more. Also, because art is now and always has been something of a luxury item, in past centuries it was not something commonly used to decorate people's homes. That means that the majority of art created in Europe in centuries past was intended to decorate public buildings, most often churches, which explains the religious theme. I'd also just want to clarify that while some of you may be religious and some not, some of you may be Christian and some not, this doesn't put anyone at an advantage or disadvantage. When we look at Christian art or work from other religious traditions from the perspective of art appreciation, we're thinking about these visually, as paintings and sculptures. Sometimes we will think of a religious work in terms of how people might have felt for whom they were created in the past. And while some of you may be more familiar than others with the Bible stories depicted in the paintings, when it relates to the questions I'm asking, I will be sure to summarize the stories. And sometimes, if our objective is beyond the details of the story, I'll just ask you to consider the image itself. Now let's come back to our discussion of the artist. What we have here is a painting by the Italian Renaissance painter Tintoretto. The painting comes from the Christian religious tradition and is titled The Archangel Michael Fighting Satan. But in your notes, when you're looking at this, I'd like you to focus on just the visual details of the work as you describe the style of the painting. What kind of space has the artist created here? How do the figures relate to one another? What is the overall mood of the painting? Take a few moments to really think about how you would describe just the style of this painting. Now, just like we did with the Rococo paintings, I'd like you to look at these two Renaissance paintings and describe which one you think is by Tintoretto and why. So one of these is a Tintoretto, and one of these is not. You might also want to make note on what characteristics these paintings share as period style and where they differ in personal style. I will reveal in the next slide which one is by Tintoretto, but pause and try to come up with your own decision first. And again, feel free to look at the previous image, go back and forth to try to really analyze these images and pick apart period versus personal style. So in the previous image, the painting on the right was by Tintoretto. So when what we're looking at here, we want to consider that personal style can also carry over, or can vary over the lifetime or career of an artist. Individuals change a lot over the years. We change physically, psychologically, emotionally, as well as in our skill levels. We also change in response to the world around us and as period style changes. People who wore bell-bottoms in the 70s, for example, don't usually still wear them today. Both of these paintings are by the Flemish artist Peter Paul Rubens, and both of them depict similar scenes of Adam and Eve. How has Rubens' style developed over the 30 years between these paintings? What might have spurred the change in his style? And has he included or excluded or changed in terms of the imagery? Does this relate to style at all? So again, take a moment and consider how Rubens' style has changed in the decades in between these paintings. Here, you'll recognize the painting on the right as one of the works by Rubens we just looked at. But on the left is a very, very similar painting by the artist Titian. It seems clear that Rubens has done his best to copy this earlier painting by Titian, but even so, his own personal style is still expressed. So in your notes, try to consider how are these paintings similar or different in terms of style. What has Rubens included in his painting that is not in Titian's? And again, take a moment to really try to pick apart the subtle differences between these two. Here are two more paintings by Titian and Rubens. These show classic mythological scenes rather than Christian imagery. Now consider, why might Rubens have copied this painting by Titian? What aspects of Rubens' personal style do we see in his copy that makes it distinctively his own? And just try to figure out, which painting do you prefer? Which artist's style do you prefer? Being able to recognize and understand style and then relate it to your own personal taste and preferences is a big part of art appreciation. We'll also want to make a special note of the color differences. As you can see, the differences in color scheme in these paintings are quite dramatic. So in your notes, make note of how these colors are different. How does that affect the mood and the atmosphere of the painting? And again, just which one appeals to you more, and why do you think that is? Now, as we look at these two paintings and we notice how similar they are, what we want to say is that both of these paintings are following the same tradition. Tradition is defined as an inherited, established, customary pattern of thoughts, actions, or behavior. Now, why might tradition have been important to Rubens or to the people he was painting for in the early 1600s? So do consider that as well. The works of art we've seen so far have been representative, meaning that there is a clear relationship between what's depicted and natural appearances. The painting we're looking at now, though, is a modern work of abstract art. Abstraction means having a generalized form with only a symbolic resemblance to visual reality. So looking at these abstract colors, forms, and lines, what do you see here? Do you have any ideas about what the artist might have been basing these forms upon, or do you think this is purely a work from imagination? You might also see more of a mood or atmosphere in a work like this. For example, there's something in the colors and lines that makes me think of the water, either boats or little fish or seaweed, but that's just my response. Your own will be just as correct. So take a moment to try to consider if you can relate this to anything in the natural world. This is another painting by Mondrian, the Dutch artist who created the work whose subject matter we were just guessing at. The title of that last painting was Flowering Apple Tree. The painting we're looking at now is just called Tree. Now that you know the title, can you see a tree in the painting? Where or how do you see those images? Do you see a tree-like image? And go back to the last slide and take a look at it again. If you didn't guess tree, if it didn't look like a tree beforehand, does it look more like one now that you have the title for it? So we want to consider how important we think it is that the viewer of an image understands the artist's intent. Titles will tell us what the artist intended, but how much does that really impact our interpretation of the painting? What we're looking at here is another example of abstract art, painted around the same time as Mondrian's tree paintings, but this is by a different artist, Vasily Kandinsky. So again, we have paintings that share period styles, but have different personal styles. And make note here of how this style is different from the Mondrian. Also, without having the title, which I don't give you in this slide, what do you think Kandinsky is painting here? What forms can you identify? Take a moment to really look and see if you can connect this to anything in the natural world. And I'll give you the title in the next image. So that last image was called Mountain. This work, also by the same artist and from the same date, but in kind of a different style, is titled Blue Mountain. What else do you see here? Is there more than just a mountain? And how would you compare this to the other mountain painting we just looked like? Is this style different between these works? So again, take a few notes and try to note how his personal style has varied from one painting to another. For our final slide today, we have two more examples of modern abstract art. These paintings are later works by the two artists we've just been looking at, Vasily Kandinsky on the left and Piet Mondrian on the right. Unlike the tree and mountain paintings, though, the subject matter in these abstractions is more difficult to locate, as both artists' personal style evolved considerably in a decade after those earlier works were completed. I'd like you to think about these paintings in terms of personal and period style. First, how does each work compare to earlier examples by the same artist? Do you see any similarities between Mondrian's trees and the painting on the right, or Kandinsky's mountain and the painting on the left? Also, in terms of period style, what qualities do these paintings share? How can we recognize them as belonging to the modern period of the early 1900s? How are they different from Rococo or Renaissance eras we were considering earlier in this presentation? Last week we defined modernism in art as reacting to past traditions in order to make art for the present day. How do you see these paintings as modern or reacting against more traditional representational types of art? So again, take a few moments to consider that, write that down in your notes, and that will help you out in the rest of the course. Thank you guys very much. Until next week, I'll talk at you later.